Hey everyone, Goran from Lutify.me here, and in this tutorial I want to talk to you about an easier way to color grade Sony's S-Log2 footage. Often we are asked if there is a way to make Sony's S-Log2 footage easier to color grade, and that is indeed a great question because while Sony's S-Log2 is an excellent container, it was really designed to work with 14 stops of dynamic range of the Sony f/65 camera and was really optimized to match the characteristics of video sensors. Now, in theory, this was a great move by Sony because that would allow for a much easier color match between Sony f/65 and other cameras made by Sony which do not have S-Log2. But in reality, this makes Sony's S-Log2 footage a bit tricky to color grade. The reason it's tricky to color grade is two. One, shadows and highlights are really rather compressed in S-Log2 compared to other log formats. So usually when you make exposure adjustments, you would usually need to make additional adjustments to shadows, highlights, and midtones separately. So that's one. The other reason why Sony S-Log2 is a bit tricky to color grade is because the color grading tools that we have in DaVinci Resolve and Premiere Pro and other software was really designed to work with Cineon-based curves and not S-Log2. So what happens is that when you're using controls like lift, gamma, gain, offset, and others, they do not behave as they would behave if you were working with, let's say, Ari's log-C format or Sony S-Log3 or any other log format based on the Cineon curve. So the behavior of the tools, and if you're familiar with these, is very different when you're working with S-Log2. So we'll get to how we can make S-Log2 footage easier to color grade, but first let's get to the basics of color grading. So here I have a frame which was kindly provided by Leigh Rodgers. This was shot on Sony A7 II, and this is shot in S-Log2 format. And what we have here is the log image coming from the sensor. And the first thing you would want to do usually is to normalize your footage so you can view it properly. Now, you don't want to do this step as the very first step in your color pipeline or in your color workflow, because once you have converted your footage into Rec. 709 or any other narrower space, you're effectively limited to that color space. So you do want to normalize your footage to convert it into Rec. 709 or P3 or any other color space that you will be working with. However, you want to make it as late as possible in your pipeline. So what I have here is a few nodes that I have added. So I will turn this one on, and what we have here is the converted image from S-Log2 into Rec. 709. Now this image was shot overexposed, as many filmmakers do when they use S-Log2, especially with the A7S, A7 II cameras. So this needs some exposure adjustments. Now, when you are making primary corrections like white balance, exposure, contrast, and stuff like that, you want to make these corrections directly on your log footage. You don't want to make these after your footage has been converted into Rec. 709 because you will be limiting yourself to a narrow color space and a narrow dynamic range. So you want to make these exposure changes before this log conversion happens, and that is exactly what I did on this node here. I'll turn this on, and what I did is I simply used the offset tool to lower the exposure up to approximately correct exposure level that this footage would require. So this is the basic S-Log2 footage that we have very simple exposure adjustment here, and then we have the footage corrected or converted into Rec 709 so we can view it properly. Now, we'll remember this. I have already grabbed the still of this image here, so we'll get to that a bit later. Now, what we have here is the very same frame captured in S-Log2. However, we will treat this one differently. Now, when I say differently, I mean we will make it easier to color grade. So what we'll do is basically we will take this S-Log2 footage and we will convert it into S-Log3. Now, I hear already some of you saying S-Log3 is noisier, it will introduce noise to my footage. Well, I can assure you this won't happen. If you captured your footage in S-Log2 and if you made sure your exposure is correct, when you convert this into S-Log3, you will not have any additional noise, especially after you set your exposure and contrast of the footage properly. But the reason we will be converting this S-Log2 footage into S-Log3 is simple. I mentioned before that these tools here and others are basically designed to work with Cineon-based curves, and S-Log3 is a Cineon-based curve. S-Log2 is not, but S-Log3 is. So when we convert this footage from S-Log2 into S-Log3, we will make our lives easier because these tools will behave as you are used to, and exposure changes and contrast changes for your footage will be much easier. So how do we do that? Okay, so here is our original footage. I will add a serial node. And if you are working in DaVinci Resolve, converting this from S-Log2 to S-Log3 is very simple. What you want to do is go to OpenFX. So we open our plugins here, and then we use the color space transform. We drag and drop it on our serial node, and basically what we do is simply under the input gamma we select the S-Log2, which is the gamma of this footage, and under the output gamma we simply select S-Log3. That's it. Now we have converted our footage from S-Log2 to S-Log3. And the S-Log2 would look like this, and this is the S-Log3. So S-Log2 and S-Log3. Now this is a duplicate of what I did here, so I can just go ahead and delete this node. And what we would want to do is now convert this again, as we did before, into Rec 709, so we can view this footage properly. And this is exactly what I did on this serial node. I used the log conversion from our package, but in this case, it would be the log conversion from S-Log3 to Rec 709, because whatever happens after this serial node is S-Log3. So now footage is in S-Log3, so we need to use the S-Log3 log conversion LUT. So I'll turn this one on, and let me just for a second go back to this one. I'll turn the exposure adjustment here off, and you can see that our frames for now are identical, and they should be, because a correct conversion from S-Log2 to Rec 709 should be the same as conversion from S-Log2 into S-Log3, and then from S-Log3 into Rec 709. Because we haven't made any changes to our file, to our footage, both should look the same. So I'll go back here to this S-Log2 for a moment, and I will turn back on the exposure adjustment. And if you have a look here at the offset control, you can see that I have dialed the offset to 15, down from 25, which is the default value here. And now I will go ahead and do the same on this clip which was converted into S-Log2. Now, if you remember, I said that whatever happens after this serial node, which is the serial node on which we convert the footage from S-Log2 into S-Log2, whatever happens after is working with the S-Log3 footage. So what I did here is the same offset change from 25 to 15, and now I will turn this on. And now we have a differently looking footage because the offset control that we changed here is now working with S-Log3, which is a Cineon-based curve, so the offset is working properly, let's say. Properly is not the correct word here, but it's working more as it was supposed to work as opposed to the S-Log2. Now, if we quickly switch between these two, you can see the difference between these two frames. And if we, for a moment, just load the S-Log2 shot here, you can see how our image changes. So the brighter version is the S-Log2, the darker version is the S-Log3. But what's more important to understand here is that we, in the S-Log2 version, we have additional contrast. And if we were to achieve this result that we did with a simple exposure change on the S-Log3, what we would need to do when we were working in S-Log2, we would have to make some contrast adjustments. We would have to usually lower the highlights and make some other changes as well. So that's the very basics of making S-Log2 footage easier to work with, and that is to convert it into S-Log3 and make your corrections on the S-Log3 footage. Now, if we go into Premiere Pro, what you would want to do is basically replicate the steps that we did from DaVinci Resolve, except you would either stack Lumetri color effects on your clips, or you would use adjustment layers onto which you would apply Lumetri effect. It's up to you which method you prefer. So basically, in the S-Log2 version, what I have here is simply I dial the exposure down by 1, and then I use the S-Log2 to Rec 709 log conversion LUT. Now in the S-Log3 version, which I have created, I basically first used a LUT to convert it from S-Log2 to S-Log3, and then I dialed the exposure down. However, this takes place after our conversion from S-Log2 to S-Log3, so this is taking place in S-Log3. And then I have converted this footage from S-Log3 to Rec 709, and that's basically a replication of the steps that I did in DaVinci Resolve. So this is the S-Log3 version, and this is the S-Log2 version with an exposure adjustment. Now, obviously, you are asking yourself at this point, where do I get LUTs to convert from S-Log2 into S-Log3? And the answer is you get it from our website for free. You just go to the blog post linked in description and download the relevant conversion LUTs. Okay, so if you have downloaded the conversion LUTs from the blog post link in the description, you will find the following three folders inside that download. And the first one is a 1D LUT that goes from S-Log2 to S-Log3, which was designed to be used in Adobe's software. So this one will work in Photoshop, Premiere Pro, but it will not work in most other software that do not specifically support the Adobe specification of the cube format, as this is a one dimensional LUT. Make sure you use this one in Premiere Pro or Photoshop. If you happen to be using some other software which does support one-dimensional LUTs, but it does not work with Adobe spec of the cube file, then you can use this one-dimensional shaper LUT. And as a rule of thumb, it is actually recommended to work with one-dimensional shaper LUTs when converting gamma only. And in this case, that's what we are doing. We are only converting the gamma from S-Log2 to S-Log3. We're not touching the color space. If your software supports the use of one-dimensional LUTs, but it does not work specifically with Adobe's spec, then use this one-dimensional LUT shaper. And if your software does not support the use of one-dimensional LUTs, we offer two 3D LUTs in 33 by 33 by 33 size and 65 by 65 by 65. You would want to use the larger shaper LUT for the gamma conversion as it is more accurate. But if your software does not support LUTs of that size, you can always use the smaller 33 by 33 by 33 size LUT. So that would be that for today. I really hope you test this method and try to see if it makes your S-Log2 footage easier to color grade. And if you like this tutorial, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell button so you get a notification when we release a new tutorial. And of course, should you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. And until next time, see you and bye-bye.